Okay, right, so the next material type we're going to be looking at, blend mode, is translucent. And if we open this one up, next on our list down here is translucent. And this just allows us to use a full 8-bit opacity. So we can now use a full grayscale texture or floating point value in our opacity, and we'll get see-throughness or different levels of opaqueness and opacity, and you can change that. So 0 being completely see-through, I could type, there we go, 1 being fully opaque. But even this though is not the same as an opaque material. It's using a different render pipeline. Translucent materials are expensive because you can layer multiple on top of each other, and you end up with overdraw because each pixel has not only the cost of the material behind, but also the cost of every material layer of translucency, and so it can get very expensive very quickly. If we do want to have access to our other inputs, if we want to have things like metallic or normal map inputs in here, we need to change the lighting model. So setting our blend mode to translucent here allows us to have a translucent material, but then there's different ways we can light that. And so if we scroll down, there's a whole section here on translucency. Important one being lighting mode. Now, volumetric non-directional is the default. It's the cheapest. It's used for things like smoke and dust, says here, so fog, anything like that where you just want like a thin layer of translucency. That's fine, but it's not too expensive, but it doesn't have the fully features of other sort of rendering things. If I change this to surface translucency volume, this is going to be lighting for a surface. It's very expensive though. It's going to be about 6 or 7 times more expensive per pixel. You can see it even takes quite a bit longer to do the compilation. So there, but it does give us access to our inputs, so normal, roughness, all of that stuff. Do you have an example? If I spin on a couple here, we've got the translucent surface example here, and here we've got normal map plugged in, and we're using a roughness, and you can see we're getting kind of like a frosted glass bricks kind of material here. Works quite well, much more expensive. So when you are doing translucency, just make sure that you're not doing anything too expensive. There's some workarounds to make cheap translucency look good or look okay, and we'll cover that later on. But one thing when you are doing your translucent materials, just pay attention to what the lighting model is, because otherwise things won't look right or they'll be really expensive. Last one in here, while we're looking at translucency, there is an option for the lighting mode for per vertex. So if we look at a per vertex directional, so directional allows us to have access to things like a normal map, but not the things like roughness. So it's sort of a halfway house between fully featured and no features. But in this case, by setting it to per vertex, we're now doing our lighting calculation for each vert rather than for each pixel. This is quite a dense sphere, and even so, if you look how many vertices there are across or around the shape versus how many pixels this would cover, it's a big optimization to do per vert rather than per pixel. And we'll see this a couple of times. There's a few different things we can do in materials per vert and per pixel, and it's always, well, it will always be more optimal to do per vertex. Nanite might change these things, obviously using very, very high density meshes, but it's almost always going to be cheaper to do per vertex rather than per pixel. Okay, so translucency, yeah, simple grayscale translucency with volumetric non-directional, but good for things like smoke and dust and fog and that kind of thing, but no lighting information for the normal, no roughness, no PBR. Surface translucency volume, fully featured but very expensive, so have to pick your battle between the two or use an approximation, and we'll cover those later.